I was bit by a tick, and it was my first month of pregnancy. My health started going downhill, and I became weaker and weaker. I was working out, and I became weaker and weaker. And it took 6.5 years to diagnose me. So my daughter was only 5 when we were diagnosed. And when they said that she got it in utero, my heart sank. And you know that um, that fear when your child is sick and there's very little you can do about it is just such a desperate feeling.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about overcoming Lyme disease and chronic illness. I'm delighted to welcome Mary Lyn Hammer. Mary Lyn is a health wellness advocate, practitioner, consultant, entrepreneur, and the author of Over My Dead Body. You can reach Mary Lyn at her website, championforlife.com, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, Mary Lyn. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Oh, thank you so much, Linda. I'm very excited about this.
I am too. This is a topic that I haven't covered yet, and that is kind of rare because it seems like we've had a little of this, a little of this, a lot of that. And we're talking about Lyme disease and about chronic illness and about finding natural ways to overcome. Can you tell your story about why this matters to you?
Well, I was bit by a tick, and it was my first month of pregnancy. So, people are like, did you feel like, tired or this or that? Well, it was my first trimester, so I felt all of that. I thought it was normal. And the only thing that was not normal about it was that I had a bite on my leg for about 4 months, and I couldn't figure it out. I grew up in Montana where there's lots of bugs. So, you know, I remember actually emailing a friend that was at the same conference and saying, "What is up with the bites from Hilton Head? Like, I still have a hole in my leg." And um, I used to be an extreme skier, and I was in really good shape. I was rated in the top 5 to 10% of skiers in the world, and my health started going downhill, and I became weaker and weaker. I was working out, and I became weaker and weaker. And it took 6.5 years to diagnose me. So my daughter was only 5 when we were diagnosed. And uh, when they said that she got it in utero, my heart sank. And you know that um, that fear when your child is sick and there's very little you can do about it is just such a desperate feeling. And my infection was much greater than hers, probably because she had some shields, going on in utero. Um, and so I started very aggressively with a treatment plan. I had 12 IVs a week and about 300 pills a day. And I was doing these horrible shots that were lipid based, so 10 cc's. It was, I asked one of my friends to help me because it was very thick. And so I was so weak, I had a hard time pushing the drug into my muscle. And she said, it's like a harpoon. And she said,
Wow.
I tell you what, I'll just lay on the floor and launch it at you. And that's when I pass out, then I'm already laying on the floor and I won't hurt myself. So we turned it into a joke. However, it was really rough. The treatments were very, very intense, very expensive because I had to pay for both of us. And for the most part, the treatments are not covered by medical insurance. So the same month I was diagnosed, which was in October 2006, the NIH released a report saying latent chronic Lyme didn't exist. And the Connecticut Attorney General sued the NIH because it was written by doctors who had never treated latent chronic Lyme disease. And they won. And the report was pulled out. Although that's kind of the belief that doctors have. And I mean, I went to so many doctors who just couldn't give me answers. I went from one to another. And my primary was from Hawaii, so he had no experience with Lyme. he didn't even know what to look for. And that's very common, that people go through just kind of medical hell to try and find answers. And there's so many people who are misdiagnosed because there's so many different symptoms. And I just read a study where it says they have DNA testing for 46 different strands of Lyme disease. And on top of that, you have all these co-infections. And so the co-infections vary quite a bit, but usually most people that I see have at least 5 different infections. And, so it's like chasing down a rabbit hole once you get a diagnosis. And I used an energetic device way back then, and we used to call it the IV room, where all of us were in there getting IVs at the same time. And I started testing people around me. And I had bought the device. It was about $20,000 because my daughter was only 5. And I didn't want to put her on all of the drugs and IVs that I was on. Like we used to go down in the hyperbaric chamber to do her homework. And so, I turned it into, we're doing a submarine dive to go do your homework, try and make it fun for her. But it was really a really tough experience. So because of this energetic device, I started seeing patterns. And one of the patterns that I saw was tuberculosis bacterium. But when we tested, it wasn't full-blown tuberculosis. But everybody had that same pattern. And I agreed to do a round of tuberculosis medicine, and the infection, the die-off, was so horrible that I smelled like a rotting animal. Like, it was terrible. I had 104 fever for about 6 months because Lyme releases a neurotoxin, and it does that on a daily basis when it's alive. But when you kill it, it's like any living animal that dies. It kind of pukes out all of the fluids, and so your toxic load explodes. And that made me feel a lot better, just getting rid of that piece of it. So that was a huge piece to figure out. And that was in 2007. And it wasn't until 2019 that the CDC released a report saying that humans could contract tuberculosis from deer. And I was like, it's a co-infection. And so that was one big piece of it. And then in the summer of 2008, I also did performing dance, Latin dancing, and my doctor was my partner. And I started getting a pain in my right arm to the point where I couldn't lift my arm, and I had to stop dancing with our group. At first, I thought it was tennis elbow, because this entire time I have a business. It's 35 years old now, servicing student loans. That's a whole other can of worms there. But I still had to travel and work. I was a single mom. Through this whole thing, I had to work. And so I thought it was tennis elbow from fluffing my suitcase around. And the pain kept growing. It went across my chest and into the rest of my body. And I had an IV port at that time. And one day when they were taking blood out of the port, this white stuff came into the syringe. And there was 4 doctors in the clinic that day, and they all looked at it. They had no idea what it was. They said, well, I've never seen anything like this. And it kind of came in little white clumps, and then it lumped together, and it looked like a piece of styrofoam. And they sent the whole thing off to the lab, and it came back fibrin. And we didn't really know what that means, but the blood infection that I had has a 3% survival rate. And I nearly died in September that year. And, there were so many things along the way that the only way I can explain it is it was God moments, where answers would come to me through prayer. Um, I was gray, like I turned gray. My hair was falling out. My guts were falling out. Um, and I literally was laying in bed and praying that I wouldn't die. And my daughter would come home from school and sit on the bed to do her homework. And I had a brother that died when I was a baby, and he was 3 years old. And I could feel him with me my whole life. And at one point I crossed over, and his name was David, and he was there, and that we were at the beginning of the tunnel of light. And I said, "Oh, you're here to take me through the light." And he said, "No, I'm here to tell you that it's not your time yet. You're going back." And then it was like falling. And when you're out of your body, you don't feel the pain. And so a lot of times, if you've ever been around somebody who's dying and you'll see them kind of shudder and then open their eyes, that's their soul going back in their body, because all of a sudden you feel all the pain. And that's what it was like. And I crossed over several times. And um, I was saved by two strangers. One of my therapists kept saying, "You have the same pattern as this woman who died," and I'm still in touch with her husband. And they got the name of the blood infection right before she died, but it was too late. And so it was the day after Labor Day. And I called her, I said, "Would you please call him and get the name of the infection?" Because I was going downhill very rapidly. And she called, and he said, "Well, I'm in Florida." I was living in Arizona at the time. And he was in Florida and said he'd be back on Friday and he'd get the information to her. And she said, "I don't think she's going to live that long." And so he called his son, and the son went over to the house and got the name of the infection and got it to my doctor. And they got me on the right antibiotic. And that saved my life. And I've never met them. I wrote them a big thank you letter. But that saved my life. And from that point, it took about 10 weeks before I could walk across a room. And at Christmas time, I thought, well, we got to get all these toxins out of our bodies. We're going to do Green's First Cleanse. And so I did that with both my daughter and me. And we both got very, very sick. And I went back to my doctor, and he said, your blood infection's back, which was absolutely terrifying to me. And I was on his computer reading the research, and he was on the phone with the pharmacist trying to figure out what to put me on. And I got to the point in the research where it said that the blood infection had a biofilm. And I had studied, every time they told me something, I would go and study it, research it. And I knew that Lyme disease had a biofilm. And the doctors and I, we were collaborative at that point, because they were like, you're like having another doctor on our team, because I had done so much research. And so I said, "Doctor, this has a biofilm." And I knew, like in my gut, I knew that was a huge piece that we'd figured out. And what we figured out was that the cleanse was dissolving the biofilm, and so the biofilm is a fibrin fibrinogen material that the pathogens create themselves to hide in. So a lot of people call it remission in Lyme disease, and it's not really remission, it's that they haven't taken care of the infection. So what happens is, when the antibiotics in the body, it's killing the Lyme disease that's active, and then it starts hiding in this biofilm. And when the person stops taking the antibiotic, it waits until the antibiotic's out of the system, and then it comes back out later. And so it's not really remission, it's that it was hiding, and then it becomes active again. That's one of the reasons it's so hard to get rid of. And so we came up with a protocol to dissolve the biofilm at the same time we were on the antibiotics. And about 6 weeks later, we were Lyme-free. It took longer for the blood infection because it was much more aggressive. And when I knew that they told me that I needed to put my daughter in public school, and she was in the second grade because she had some learning challenges and cognitive function challenges from the Lyme disease. And I said to the teachers, just hang in with me. I think we figured it out. And then by the end of January, they were calling me and saying, Elizabeth is learning the new material just as fast or faster than the other kids. And in February, she came home from school one day and she said, Mommy, this is the best Monday of my life. And I said, why, honey? And she said, because I'm not tired. That's when I knew that we had it. And that was 2009, and we've been Lyme free since then. And then one of the first things I did, I had a friend that I grew up with that had been on disability for 8 years. And I went to see her. I said, you're coming to see my doctor. We're going to get you well. And she was so funny. She said, I don't know if I have time, but she hadn't left her apartment in years. So I said, well, let me put it this way. If you don't come with me, I think you're going to die. And she said, well, since you put it that way, I'll come with you. And we had her doing aerobics in 6 months using the same protocol because, I had to figure it out along the way. So it took longer for me to heal because I was still figuring it out. And then it takes a long time to heal the body after that. So when I work with people, we have 3 phases. The first phase is preparing the body because I have people that have come to me that have been sick for over 30 years. And so we prepare the body for healing, build it up, get rid of what we call opportunistic infections. We run these energetic scans and show them what they're allergic to, what foods they're allergic to, so they can eliminate them, because all of those things rob the body of energy that's needed to heal. And, it's a moving target because Lyme mutates into all these different life forms, and there's co-infections, and they're all moving because it was designed as a bioweapon. And it was designed to take people out. And so if doctors don't know what life form it is active at the time that they're treating, they're just, throwing something against the wall and seeing if it sticks. And the way we do it is I scan people every 2 weeks to see if it's mutated or what's active, so that we can keep changing what we're doing to match what infection is active. And then when you're dissolving biofilm, anything can come out. Like any disease they've ever had can come out of that biofilm. So you have to be on top of that all the time, because a lot of people have had sepsis before and that might come out. You have to really be on top of it and monitor it closely. So that's how we work with people. So the first phase is preparing the body. The second phase is when we are actually killing the pathogens. And then the third phase is when we clean up the body and rebuild it. And it takes a while for the immune system to start working well. The first time my daughter got a cold after we got rid of the Lyme disease, she had this really high fever, and it was rough on her, and it didn't match, it was just a cold. But because the body's so used to being in this protective state, the immune system kind of goes crazy for a while. Anything comes near it, it goes crazy trying to protect it when it doesn't really need to have that level of protection. So we have to get the immune system to work properly again so that stops happening. And then we build the body up. So I'm skiing again, I hike, I do all this stuff. My daughter graduated from college last year with honors. And it was quite a journey. And I'm very excited to be able to help others. Every day I have people calling me. It's like one of my clients, after 3 weeks in the program, she's a minister, and she called me and she said, I did a wedding Saturday and I stood all day and I even danced, and we were like doing the happy dance, like, because she hasn't been able to do that in years. And so, I'm crying all the time because we have all these celebrations with the people that I work with. And it's really amazing to watch them get their lives back.
This is amazing. I had no idea. What you have been through is horrific and
Yeah.
confusing and discouraging because it hides. And what a frustrating thing that when you're getting something to die off, that it also that phase gives additional poisons and it makes you sick. So
Mhm.
as you're sick and then you're sicker, I mean, how would you know that this is part of the healing process and not that I'm getting worse? And then with the biofilm, did you say that the bacteria creates it, or does your body kind of create it to encapsulate it?
No, the pathogen creates its own biofilm. So when the pathogen comes into the body, people are more familiar probably with parasites than any of these type of things. And Lyme actually has a parasitic version. One of the mutations is parasitic. And, with parasites, if you've ever tried to get rid of parasites, it's quite an ordeal to try and get rid of them. Well, parasites create a biofilm in your gut.
Mm.
And so if you're not dissolving the biofilm in your digestive system, you're not going to get rid of the parasites. And that's why it's so hard to get rid of them. So it's kind of the same thing. And then some of the infections, the co-infections, are actually harder to get rid of than the Lyme itself. Like Babesia is one of the infections that's usually the last one to go. And Babesia is similar to malaria. It's a similar pathogen. Lyme disease, Lyme itself, the bacterium is a spirochete, which is similar to syphilis. And there's a lot of frustrating things about Lyme disease, but the misinformation that's been out there for decades uh, have people make decisions that they would probably change otherwise. So it transfers in utero. That's one thing. For years, they said that didn't happen. Well, that's the only way that my daughter had it. She was born with it. It was in utero. Um, it's the same pathogen as syphilis. So they used to say that it was not sexually transmitted. It is. When I work with somebody and they have a sexual partner, sometimes they're cooperative and sometimes they're not. But if you're not treating the whole family, they just give it back and forth to each other.
Wow,
So
that's
that's a
frustrating.
very hard conversation to have. And I had one man, he came to every appointment with his wife, and she said every time we have sex, he gets sick. And I said, well, it is sexually transmitted. And so he agreed to let me run the scan on him, and he had Lyme disease, and he was just devastated because he wanted to be there for his wife and to take care of her. And now all of a sudden it explained a lot. However, to him, it was so deflating that he couldn't be there for her, that now he was sick too. And it's a hard conversation. And I have one of my clients, she was diagnosed with Lyme when she was 13 and she's 44. She has 4 kids and is married. And, at some point, she's going to have to treat the whole family.
What works to help dissolve that biofilm? What did
Um,
you do?
I do a series of different enzymes to dissolve it. Uh, and what I have figured out is that the symptoms are determined by where the biofilm grows. So for example, if you've got biofilm in your ears, like I had tinnitus was one of the things that I had, and the ringing was so loud that I couldn't filter out the background noise, so I couldn't hear for a few years. And I mean, I heard noise, but I couldn't decipher what people were saying. I had to really concentrate, and big crowds were hard for me, which was really rough being at conferences like that. And that went away after a while. Um, I had migraine. I had a migraine for about 5 years. And then one day I was in my office and I have windows all the way around my office. And I was looking out the window and it dawned on me. I said, I'm looking out the window into the daylight and I'm okay. And I was like, my migraine had gone away. Um, when I was diagnosed, I couldn't feel my feet up to my ankles. And it was neuropathy like, when your feet are waking up, that pain,
Hmm.
it was like that all the time. And that had been going on about 5 years. And I was in Washington, D.C., because I help write education laws. And um, we were walking to dinner after a day on the Hill, and I said, my feet are sore. And I went, oh my God, my feet are sore. I'm like jumping for joy. Everybody with me is going, what is wrong with you? Because I hadn't felt my feet in years. And, so slowly the symptoms will go away. So like when somebody presents like they have fibromyalgia, it's actually biofilm on the connective tissue. And then it gets hard, so the muscles can't move back, because muscles, the connective tissue is like that slimy stuff when you're butchering chicken. So that helps the muscles move back and forth like this. So when the biofilm gets on that connective tissue, there's all kinds of nerves in there. So that's where the nerve pain comes from. But it's prohibitive to your muscles moving like they're supposed to. And so all of these, and they're often misdiagnosed with these things. If it's growing around the nerve pain, they can be diagnosed with Parkinson's and, nerve type disorders, fibromyalgia. It's misdiagnosed all the time. MS is a very common misdiagnosis. And so that I was very blessed to find the energetic devices that I have. And I mean, really, it gives me a roadmap, but it's different for everybody. It has all these mutations, but it doesn't mutate in the same order for everybody.
So does your energetic device, your testing apparatus, does that tell you what where it's located and what to do about it? Or is that your
Um,
starting point and then you
you have to you have to look for patterns. So it tests every system in the body, and you have to look for patterns. Like it might be the pancreas at some point, and um, so you'll see different things lighting up on pancreas and insulin and blood sugar levels and that type of thing, and where that wasn't there like the month before. And then it's got indicators in there for fibrinogen. And um, you also monitor their blood viscosity because the blood gets very thick, and that's biofilm in the blood. So, like cholesterol has a biofilm, and cancer has a biofilm. To have an effective treatment for cancer, you have to dissolve the biofilm.
and is this
So,
you're taking enzymes? Is it through food or is it a supplement or is it a shot? Is it a drug? I mean,
um,
what are you
it,
using?
it's It's a combination. I mean, we monitor what people eat very closely because of the allergies. And when people go into my program, it's a 4 to 6 month program because there's variations of how bad the infection is and what goes on. And some people have to go a little slower than others. I'm kind of a get it over with girl, so I'll just blast through things. And um, other people are, they can't handle that. So it's very individualized. Um, but the we put people into a food program. It's called Purium, and it's very clean and it has a lot of greens. We do cleanses. Um, your elimination pathways get very clogged up because of all these neurotoxins. And this sounds gross, but the dead carcasses, because once it dies,
Yeah, I get it.
you have to get it out of your body. And so like you've only got, a few pathways. You've got your liver, your kidneys, your skin, your lymphatic system, and your sinuses. And those are your elimination pathways. And so if those aren't working properly, then we have to clean all of that up. So I start with cleanses and getting them on superfoods so that we can build their body up. And the enzymes can be a combination of tinctures, sometimes pills, superfoods. It really depends on what the person, I don't care what form it is. If it's in a form that they're going to actually take it, then that's the form I use. If they, because I still have a hard time swallowing pills because I was taking 300 pills a day. I mean, it was crazy. My protocol is nothing like that now. But that's what the doctors had me on when I was diagnosed. And so we use a combination. We rotate through things because that's the best way to be effective with it, is to just keep rotating through things, because it's a bioweapon. It's intelligent. So the pathogens will mutate themselves, and we don't know which direction they'll mutate. Like that's what the flu does. That's a good example. That's why they have a different flu shot every year, and it's usually not effective because they have to guess at how it's going to mutate. And most of the time they guess wrong. So this is the same thing. You don't know which way it's going to go. So we just rotate through things. And then when one's effective, we stay on that for a period of time, but we usually have to switch it up every 2 to 4 weeks.
So with the rotation you're talking about, are you doing a certain protocol for 2 weeks or so and then saying, okay, look, is this working? Is this making a difference? Is this working? Is this making a difference? And yet sometimes if it's working, it makes you sicker. So how do you know if it's working or you're just getting worse?
Well, because it's called Herxheimer's reactions. They actually have a medical term for it, and that's the reaction of the body that shows you that it's working, because that's when the neurotoxin level goes up, and that's what causes the Herxheimer's reaction. So it's typical, like when you get sick, you have a fever, your nose is running, all of those things happen. It's like having a really bad cold.
Okay.
And so, and you've got to do spurts. You have to make sure that you're cleaning it up at the same rate that it's releasing the pathogens. So that's why we prepare the body first and clean it up before I even start working on the pathogens. I want to get the people where their pathways are working right to eliminate all of this. And, that's usually involves a liver cleanse, a kidney cleanse, parasite cleanse. It just depends on what they have. And we get all of that taken care of and build the immune system before I even introduce enzymes. Because if they're already at a toxic load, a high toxic load, and we start dissolving the biofilm,
Your body can't handle it. You
it's,
can't get rid of it.
yeah,
It's too
yeah,
much. You're
people go
overwhelmed.
into overload. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it's very complicated, and people are like, well, can you just tell me what to do? It's like, well, no, because there's so many different factors that you have to consider. If I didn't have this energetic device, I would have never been able to figure it out. I wouldn't be able to heal people as quickly as I do. Um, and some people are way more challenging, like that lady that's had this for 31 years before she came to me, and she was very, very sick, um, and you have to celebrate the little wins. So things like when she says, I had my first normal period for the first time in 30 years.
Wow.
things like that. Or a big thing is that people, their digestive system stops working right, so they get very constipated. And some of that is a disease, and some of that is because the doctors typically put them on long-term doxycycline, which is really rough on your gut. And so I have people that come to me and they haven't had a normal bowel movement in years.
Wow.
So I have a lot of calls of, I've gone to the bathroom every day. And that's a huge win. But if you haven't, if that doesn't work, and it's like, like you have that squeezing action, the peristaltic action.
Uh-huh.
And so that we call it lazy colon, and that stops working. So your food's just sitting there, getting rotten. And so we have to get that working. That's one of the most challenging parts is getting the digestive system to work properly. Because sometimes that's gone on for so long, it's like it doesn't remember how to work right.
Wow. This is mind-blowing. So you wrote a book. Do people have to come in person? If someone is listening and thinking, oh my gosh, is this what I've been looking for? Is this the answer to the thing that I've been struggling? Should they get the book and read it? Should they try to find you? Do you have to work in person one-on-one, or do you do?
No. The energetic device works anywhere in the world, really. It's if you look at each person and really everything, every living thing on Earth has its own energetic signature. Like a cell phone. That's the easiest way for people to understand it. It's like a cell phone. So once your number is programmed in there, you can dial it up and it'll, just like your cell phone will ring in China or Africa or, wherever you are in the world. Um, it's the same kind of thing. So once I have somebody programmed in there, I can just dial them up. I can do the scans remotely. I can do treatments. And so most of the people that I work with are somewhere else in the
Okay.
world. The United States, or I have one gal in Netherlands, and it doesn't matter to me. It's a little more challenging in other countries because they have different laws on supplements and what we can do. So we're working through some of that. But it's a little more challenging. It's not impossible. However, it is a little more challenging. And if they can come and see me, I have all kinds of equipment. So I've got red light therapy. One of the things that I send every single person I work with is they get a wristband with a red light device. So I put mine on when I'm working on my computer and turn it on, and that's a treatment. And it's really easy for them to use, and they get it for the rest of their lives. So everybody gets one of those. I use red and blue light therapy. I use a device called the Beamer, which stimulates oxygen and blood flow in your microcirculatory system, because pathogens can't live in an oxygen-rich environment, which is why a lot of the doctors were using the hyperbaric chambers, but those are so expensive. Most people can't afford to do that. I ended up buying an ozone machine that I used with my daughter because I couldn't afford to keep going to the hyperbaric chamber. So I used an ozone machine, and I would put the little Tyvek suit on her, and she was so little, I had to put a towel around her neck, and I put rubber bands at the end of the feet and the hands. I'd plug a movie in and treat her like that. So there's different things that can help reduce the Herxheimer's reaction, and that helps a lot. So, and if they are not where they can come to me, then we look for those type of things in the areas where they live, so that they can get some physical support to help them deal. It's usually to deal with the die-off. It really doesn't have anything to do with killing the disease. It's usually to help them cope with the die-off.
Fascinating. Okay.
Yeah.
This is eye-opening. Thank you, Mary Lyn. I had
You're welcome.
no idea. And
Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry that you went through it. And yet you are the person who became, as you said, one of the team of doctors who specializes in this particular field of
mhm,
this is a tricky one. This is
yeah.
easy to hide. And it's
Mhm,
a master of hiding, a master of disguise, master of transformation.
yeah.
And yet there's a way to do it. And you've found it and been able to help yourself, help your daughter, and to be able to help other people. Um, and so, for
Yeah.
the sake of the others, I mean, they're grateful that you were able to become a master and a physician here. So, thank you for what
I
you've
love
done.
it. And yeah, I love it. And and I'm constantly researching things. I'm just a complete geek. Other people are watching television. I'm reading medical stories or medical studies. So and if really the level of success in the program really is directly related to whether somebody follows the protocol or not. There's people that like I have one client, she's so frustrating and she's in the medical world and she's like, well, I took myself off this and I'm trying this other supplement and why isn't it working? And I said, well, I can't speak to any other supplements. I know what I have because everything I do, I've tested on myself. Everything. I do not have a single product or procedure that I haven't done myself. And so when they're like, well, can I do this instead? Well, you can.
But I can't
Yeah.
guarantee the results.
Yeah. And so but I have people that, they get in the program and they diligently do everything and they can fly through this in 4 or 5 months.
Ah,
And sometimes we have to slow it down some because they've got so much infection that the Herxheimer's reaction is too hard. Like if they're still working part or full time, it might be too much for them to function properly
right.
um, when they're going full blast. And so we have to slow it down so that it can accommodate, so they can still fulfill their own responsibilities. So, and this month is Lyme Disease Awareness Month. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, how wonderful.
And yeah, so I was thrilled to be able to come on here and share my story. And there's so many people out there. Before COVID, Lyme disease was the fastest growing epidemic in 6 continents.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Oh, that's terrifying. I had no idea. And it's enough to make you terrified to go outside
yeah,
when
yeah,
such a simple, stupid little bite can cause problems forever.
yes, yeah. I had a friend call me this weekend, and he's from California, but they bought a property out in Virginia, and they were clearing the land to build. And um, he said, so they were taking all the trees down, and he called and he said, I had numerous tick bites, and some of them have the bullseye. And I was like, get into the doctor right away. And I ran a scan on him right away. And he, and then he said, well, we stopped by the store because I said, you need to get oregano oil. And that's one of the things that dissolves the biofilm in the gut. And, when you've got other bacterium going on, it's also broad spectrum antibiotic. So it can handle some of the bacterium when it's early on. And I said, don't mess around with this. And they stopped by this health food store and they're like, well, here's cat's claw. And I can't remember what it was, but it was 3 things. And he said, they told us this was all we needed. And I said, don't listen to that. I said, he watched me go through this. I said, don't mess around with this. This is nothing to mess around with. And it's not a 2-week protocol or a 1-week protocol. Like you have to be on antibiotics for a couple months.
How do you take
And
the oregano oil? Are you putting it in a
oh, just
capsule?
orally, yeah. And with food, because I don't want the biofilm to take off, because it'll start making biofilm right away. So when somebody has a brand new bite, That's the easiest thing for them to get. You can buy a good oregano oil almost anywhere. And I use Global Healing, and I love that product. It's consistent and they're very clean. Um, so we and we have all these, or not all of the products, but I have most of the products on my website. Sometimes I'll add things in that they have to go and order online or whatever. Um,
So we're
yeah,
not just Lyme disease, but is it any disease?
or it could be anything. It could be cancer. It could be anything. All of it shows up on there. It's amazing how much is in this device. But I have an antiviral that also builds the immune system that I found when we had COVID. And somebody said if you if you had to choose one supplement for the rest of your life and that's the only one you could get, which one would it be? And it's that one because it also builds the immune system.
An
And it's
anti.
called Humisil. And so it encapsulates the virus so that it can't attach to a host cell because a virus has to have a host cell to replicate.
Hmm.
So it encapsulates the virus so it can't replicate.
And that's on
And
the
then,
website, right?
yeah, that's our top selling product.
Thank you, Mary Lyn, for visiting and for educating us. This has been so helpful, and we will include the contact information for you. Are there any other links, anything else that you want besides your
Um,
website?
well, when you go to the website, there's a logo at the top called the Lyme Crusher, and that's the name of our program. And you can click on that and do a information call with one of my staff. And after that call, if you want to move forward, then we get you scheduled. The intake is extensive. It's about 3 hours to do a full intake with somebody because I literally have to analyze everything about them. So it's a lot of work. And then we custom design what they need to do and we get started. So
3 hours is a long time, but it's a
mhm.
lot less than 6 years or 7 or 8 or 9, which is what
Yeah,
you went through. So,
yes,
I think taking that in consideration, 3 hours is a blink of an eye.
yes.
And if you get the correct information, then you're able to get the correct protocol so that you can get results. And that makes all the difference. So, wow.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And what I've discovered is that a lot of the Lyme literate doctors that are out there are doctors who have Lyme themselves. And so they become Lyme literate because they're trying to heal themselves. However, most people believe there's no way to get rid of it. And I'm living proof that there is. And I didn't go public with this for years because I kept testing myself every year and monitoring my immune system because I wanted to make sure it was really gone. I didn't want to go out there and say it's gone and then it comes back because so many people talked about it being in remission. So I wanted to know that I knew that it was really gone. And so I did that with both my daughter, myself, and my friends, and the people who I helped over the years. And I actually was getting ready to launch this whole thing when COVID hit. So I'm a little behind schedule. However, we are going for it, and we're going to be opening up centers nationwide in the future. And the name of the business is Lyme Disease Centers of America. And I'm writing the training program to teach doctors how to do this. So I'm very excited
Fantastic.
about it because I can't get to everybody. I don't, I want to get people well. I'm not into having a client for a lifetime. I want people to get well and go out and live their lives and have freedom again, because they feel like they've been in prison for years. When you have no energy to enjoy life, it's a horrible thing. So that's my goal is to spread it to as many people as I can and get them well.
So instead of spreading disease, we're spreading healing and knowledge and awareness. And that's part of why we're here today. And thank you for visiting with me.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Mary Ann Radmacher. She said, "Courage does not always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow." Today, I invite any of our listeners who are struggling with chronic illness to courageously keep trying to regain control of their health. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for tuning in to Linda's Corner podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends to help us inspire even more listeners. Be sure to visit hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free and affordable resources to help you overcome life's challenges. And explore healingbreathworkdetox.com, where you'll find transformative tools for deep inner healing and lasting change. Also, don't forget to check out my books, Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. Your journey to hope, healing, and happiness starts here.